So today my task or my job is to zoom out of everything. Where did the nation of Israel start from? What do we know about it? Can we go all the way back and look at that piece of land called Canaan before Israel? I believe that is a good place to start so that we build it up and see how Israel came about. If we want to do a reconstruction of ancient Israel, the historical saga, where does one start from? What are the tools that one needs to use? Well, I think this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to do a reconstruction of the historical saga of ancient Israel. We're going to start with what we know from outside sources, and then we're going to bring in the biblical text as needed, critically. The three tools that we are going to use would be records from the ancient Near East. We're going to have to look at those critically. We're going to use archaeology. Did I spell that right? We're going to use that critically. And then the biblical text, we're going to look at that as well critically. So if I should ask you, which time period should we zone in on? A period that will be the stage setting for the rise of ancient Israel. If we step back to look at the formation of ancient Israel, to draw a clear picture, to look at the process of the creation of ancient Israel, what period do we need to zone in on to get a panoramic view of the whole picture? We would need to look. Mr. Davis says Middle Bronze Age. Well, you close, but I think the late Bronze Age should be our focus. The late Bronze Age should be our focus. Why is that? Because it provides a well-documented case. So I'm not doing the Middle Bronze, I'm doing the Late Bronze because of the documented case, both archaeologically and textually. It provides that for the growth of the territorial political entity in the central highlands of Canaan. That is what we want to look at. Late Bronze Age. This is the geographical map, the zones that we are going to focus on today. Get familiar with this map. It shows the central hill country, what we call the central, the highlands. It shows the lowlands, the Shephelah, the coastal plains. It shows the Jezreel Valley. It shows the Transjordan Plateau. It shows the Negev Highlands. It shows everything. So we're going to be friends with maps today. Also, very critically, and I'm not going to make this boring at all. I'm going to make it fun. We need to start with the takeover of Canaan by Egypt. Extremely important. We have to look at a pharaoh, Thutmose III of the 18th dynasty. Why am I mentioning Egypt here? Most people are not aware that Canaan was a province of the Egyptian Empire. I repeat it again. Canaan was a province of the Egyptian Empire. So the pharaoh who we're going to look at, Thutmose the 3rd, 18th dynasty, which brings us to the late Bronze Age, 15th century. We have enough information archaeologically and also from extra biblical texts, and we're going to use that to reconstruct the historical situation of this land called Canaan. This means that the southern Levant and Egypt are intricately connected. Now you would understand the statement that I made that the downfall of Saul had some Egyptian influence. I'll build my case from today. What do we know about Canaan before Israel? Canaan was divided territorially. Canaan of the late Bronze Age, I'll call late Bronze II, was divided into a system of city-states that were dominated by an Egyptian administrative and military system. Each city-state consisted of a main city, which was the seat of the ruler, and a system of villages around it. So here, Egypt is in charge, and they are ruling with their administrators and small military units like garrisons in several places. The records that we have, we know about 6 administrative centers, not only from the sources, but also from archaeology. If you look on the map, you would see one at Gaza, you would see one at Bet Shean, and then you see one at Jaffa. They are the boxes. You would see circles on the map. They are the boxes. These are 3. We have an additional 3 in the northern part of the Levant. I will mention one key one with the episode of the fall of Saul and Jonathan as we go on. Now, the size of these city-states, the extent of the territories that they dominated, and then the number of villages in their surrounding area, then the volume of their population, all varied. How do we know this? What are our sources for such a reconstruction of the layout of Canaan before Israel? The textual evidence that we have is coming from the 14th century BCE. And we're looking at the Amaah letters. The Amaah letters are about 370, approximately 370 Akkadian clay tablets that were found in the late 19th century in El Amanah in Middle Egypt. They chanced upon it. What are these letters? These letters include part of diplomatic correspondence between pharaohs Amenophis the third and then the fourth, the one we popularly known as Canaan. These were the rulers of the city-states in Canaan, in the area of today's Israel. In the Amaah letters, in these correspondence, we get a picture of how they dominated Canaan, where their centers were, how they ruled over Canaan, their involvement militarily, administratively, and economically. We get all that data from these correspondence. Even the social structure. How is that possible? Because these letters were or are about daily matters, things going on in the province of the Egyptians, which is Canaan. The individuals who wrote to or received these letters from Egypt were all rulers of city-states. I like calling them petty kings. They were kings, but they were petty, small kings. And in their letters, we even get the names of the city-states and the territorial map of the city-states, which is territorial map of late Bronze Canaan, which is extremely important. My focus is the north, or what became the north, the main city-states, the future territory of the northern kingdom of Israel. From the coastal plains, we have Ty, marking them with yellow stars. We have Akko, Akshaf, Ginti, Kemel, what became Gath or Kamel, and then we have Giza. This is what we have in the coastal plains. In the southwestern Syria, we have Damascus and then Ashtaroth. In the Jordan Valley, we have Hazor, the biggest, Rehob, and Pihel. In the Jezreel Valley and vicinity, we have Megiddo, we have Shimon, and Anaharat. And then, the most important, my focus today, in the highlands of Samaria, we have Shechem. These letters provide us with all this data. Extraordinary, I think. Well, the letters don't only show us the city-states, it also provides data on the location of Egyptian administrative centers in Canaan. That is in the 14th century. The main Egyptian centers in the area discussed here were Bet-Shean, Jaffa, and then you had Gaza at the bottom. I forgot to bring Gaza there. So Bet-Shean at the top, Jaffa, and then at the bottom we have Gaza. Let me pause here and then put Gaza there because it's important. As I do that, are there any questions?
Rabbi, and this was in the 14th century, right?
Yes.
So this was supposed to be when Joshua was taking over all of Canaan, correct? I'm going to close my mic.
Mr. Jason likes trouble. Here we go.
Rabbi.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, I have a question. Can you show me again where Jaffa is?
Give me 1 second.
Unclick it and click it again. Is that like in the Jordan Valley?
Give me 1 second. Yes, it's in the no, it's in the coastal plains. Right there, Giza. Do you see Giza on the screen? On top of Giza.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. So now you see the 3 Egyptian administration on my map. There's 6 of them. These 3 are my focus because I'm going to tell a story. You have one in Bet-Shean, you have one at Jaffa, you have one at Gaza. I have a question here. Will any of these letters available in the reading assignments? Correct. Yes. So if you want I'll send a link. I'll give a link to where you can read these letters from the Amana letters. I would send the link out. Okay. So these are the non-male city-states. Maine. Oh boy, what's wrong with me? Main city-states. There we go. So yeah, these are the main city-states. The coastal plains, the southwest Syria, Jordan Valley, Jezreel Valley, and vicinity. This is what we have. And then you have the 3 Egyptian administrative centers. This is where this is how they ruled or dominated their province, or this province of theirs, which is Canaan. Yeah. Now, how do we know these letters came from these places? So So this is the Amana letters is a source that we can go to and determine this. But archaeologically, how do we know these letters came from these places? Now, what archaeologists did was they did what we call a petrographic investigation. You take a tablet from the seat of the sender of that tablet, and then you look at the mineralogy of the clay. So let's say we get a tablet from Shechem. We take the soil of Shechem and then we do mineralogical analysis on both the tablets that came from Shechem and then the soil that we've taken from Shechem, and we see if they match. So petrographical investigations of the Amana letters also helped in reconstructing this territorial disposition. So not only do we have the letters, archaeological works have been done to determine that really this came from Shechem, this came from Hazor, this came from Megiddo, this came from Jerusalem. So the seat of the sender of a given tablet can be identified according to the mineralogy of the clay. So, in other words, the mineralogy of the clay should fit the geological formations in the vicinity of the seat of the sender. So, yes, this is how we determine, or how they have determined. I'm not an archaeologist. Okay. Also, for more archaeological evidence, if these city-states should be excavated, they must reveal evidence of public architecture, such as palaces and temples. Do we have that? Yes. Megiddo, Hazor, and Lachish, they provide the best examples of this. It's important to know that in most cases, the textual evidence of the Amana archives and the archaeological evidence correspond. It's pretty solid. Now, we have a stele coming from Abydos in Egypt. The Kul-Sobek stele. Stella. Some people call it Stella. It depends. American English, British English. Now, why this stele is important is because it describes an Egyptian military campaign to Shechem in the 19th century. So looking at the Middle Bronze Age. Why do we have an Egyptian military campaign going to Shechem? We have to find out. This means that there is an existence of a significant territorial political entity at Shechem as early as the Middle Bronze Age. This is hinted in this stele that was found in Abydos in Egypt. The reference to the land of Shechem tells us, or it hints to us, that it was the center of a large territorial entity. Because to send a military campaign, to send a group to Shechem, it means that Shechem was big or powerful enough and was causing issues. Well, not only Shechem, but Jerusalem is also mentioned in these execration texts. Jerusalem is also mentioned. This tells us that the entire area that we're looking at was divided between two large political bodies. A northern one that is centered in Shechem, and a southern one that is centered in Jerusalem. Look at the map carefully. Before Israel, we had these two entities. It's important. Take time, look at the map.
Wait, say that again, Rabbi. You said before when?
Before Israel, before ancient Israel, we had these two territorial entities. Shechem, which would call the north, and then Jerusalem, which would be the south.
And this is when we were Canaanites.
This is when there's no Israel. Let me put it that way. We're talking about Canaan, Mr. David.
All right, I'm with you. Go ahead.
So, Rabbi, this brings up a question for something I think that you may have touched on in the first video in this series, which was the stele, I forget the name of it, where it's the peoples called Israel would be mentioned as being
Meneptah.
right.
Yes.
Right. So would that predate this, or would this be earlier? Because what I'm thinking then, he certainly would refer to Shechem rather than Israel.
Good. That stele is from the 13th century. So this is earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I would call the Israel mentioned on Meneptah's stele Proto-Israel. I'll refer to them as Proto-Israel because they are coming in the 13th century. This is the 14th here that we're looking at. So a century before the mention of Israel on that stele. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome, Mr. Mark. So look at this carefully. It's important. We're looking at Canaan. It was already divided into two highland entities. Shechem to the north, Jerusalem to the south. What we see here is the model for the rise of ancient Israel. We're looking at where the model actually even came from. In the Bronze Age, that is in the second millennium, we are dealing with two centers in the highlands, one in Shechem and the other in Jerusalem. These will become the two Hebrew kingdoms. The city-state of Shechem and Jerusalem will become the two Hebrew kingdoms. Meaning that there came a moment when these city-states grew to become territorial kingdoms. There was a transformation of the highlands from 2 city-states into 2 territorial kingdoms. Before it got to the 2 Hebrew kingdoms, this is how it was laid out way before then. Any comments, questions?
So it was geography that allowed the North to develop faster than the South?
Geography? No. Ambition, I would say.
Uh,
Why do I say that? Well, the ruler of Shechem was this chap. I mean, the most when we say notorious in the Amana letters, it doesn't get any worse than this chap who ruled Shechem, Labayu. Okay. So the ruler of Shechem was Labayu. The ruler of Jerusalem was Abdi-Hepah. Abdi-Hepah. It wasn't David. No. David wasn't born yet. Not thought of. Labayu and his sons were the most notorious figures in the Amana letters. Why is that? It was because of their territorial ambitions and their impact on Egyptian interest in Canaan. That's why I answered the question, Mr. David, with ambition. We'll tell the story of Shechem and his maneuvers. Before then, let me give you a summary of what's happening here.